All right, my name is Megan Izzati, and I'm going to be presenting on the top 5 most common design mistakes that are made by visual design for applications today. Just to get started, I want to tell you a little bit about me first. I am a UX visual designer here at Inconsistency. I work in our D3 services department. I've been in the design space for over 7 years, and I actually have a lot of experience designing across different platforms and mediums. I don't just design for software, but I can design for all sorts of different mediums like print or web, etc. And a little bit about kind of my design strategy. I pulled a quote for you guys. Joe Soparno said that good design is obvious, but great design is transparent. And that kind of really is indicative of how I feel about design today. A little bit about our D3 consulting department. Our D3 services is the services division of Infogistics. And what we do is we actually design and build user interfaces across different platforms, and we provide the user experience, the visual design, and the solution for applications for businesses to help them take them to the next level. One of the services that we actually offer is a design review. It's like the first phase of a design project. And what it does is it identifies the strengths and the weaknesses of already existing applications in order to kind of know kind of where to go, or if there's things that we should take from the old application and keep if we're not going to start from scratch with anything. So what I have done is I've identified the 5 most common mistakes. They are misalignment, color, overcomplication, overuse of design elements, and consistency. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through each of these mistakes and define them, discuss the best practices. Then I'm going to take you through some of the real-world examples that I've put together. What I did over the last couple of weeks is I went through a lot of kind of popular iPhone and iPad and websites, brands that are recognizable, and I sort of did a design review within them to see if I could find some of these mistakes and real-world examples that you would recognize. And then what I'm going to do lastly is I'm going to take you through one of those applications, and I'm going to show you some of the how I could make those changes that I'm discussing and how it would really help the design for the application. So misalignment is really where elements should be arranged in direct relation to each other. It creates less clutter, creates order, and groups items together. And it just really, and one of the things that it really people kind of don't do properly is they don't center things within a section, or they don't center it within like either vertically or horizontally. So best practices would be to reduce the number of alignment points within your design and use a grid system to serve as a basis for your design template. Here's an example of a good alignment design. So you can see how on the side over here, on the left-hand side over here, all of the text lines up on the same line grid. And even here, there's the same margins above the icons and below the text. And again, over here, we have the same margins, and they're actually equal on each side. And that's just really important, and you find it over and over again where people don't follow this simple sort of just best practice for design. There are several different problems when it comes to color. People use too many different colors. There's so much going on with their application that it's hard for them to actually, for people to actually pay attention. And then they're not consistent from area to area of the application. They use a different color. They have the same exact title, but they use a different color for the title, but it doesn't have any real purpose within it. So the best practices would be to use a few hues, but provide contrast between them. And then also to make sure to double check different areas of your application on the site so you're using the same color consistently in different areas and not just using like a different hex or RGB color in one area and a slightly different one in another area, just so everything is consistent. Overcomplicating is just when you're providing too many steps to get to a solution, making the user work too hard to accomplish their goal. And even just in something as simple as an icon design, overcomplicating the icons, making them more complicated than they have to be. So a best practice would be to use icons that have a clear understanding behind them and not to add as much to the page that the user understands what their next steps are. and just really make things as simple as they could be in order to just not confuse the user. A lot of application use so many design elements that it just feels too designed. They can have too many different gradients in different places that don't make sense together. Or drop shadows that are too dark or overpowering and not just like a simple something to help it elevate it off the page. And I find that a lot of application design uses those things just so that they feel designed and not really to give them depth or meaning. And a lot of these design elements should really just be to create a better application, not just to have it designed. So the best practice would be to use design elements that make sense within your application, not just to use a design. Inconsistency is probably what I would say the most common problem, and I've touched on it briefly in different areas that I've talked about already. But not being inconsistent with your application is the biggest offender of design mistakes. Using a different font style, different application, using a different button style, different design elements that don't work together, and just not being consistent in brand usage. Using, if you have two different areas of the application, not using the same logo, not using the same placement of the logo, et cetera, et cetera. So the best practice would be to create a style guide to use within your application. And everyone should already be doing this already. And I've seen a lot of people with style guides, but to follow the style guide is another problem. Just to make sure that you actually follow the style guide in order to create these, create a better application. Now that I've identified these 5 main mistakes, I'm actually going to take you through my real-world examples. I'm going to start with a very common brand that you see every day, CVS. They have an iPhone application. And their iPhone application has quite a few problem areas within their visual design. First off, they have an overcomplicated middle design icons, their navigation buttons. These icons have a lot of depth and meaning to them, so when they get smaller, it's really hard for you to see what's going on. They also are you can see right there, you can also see inconsistency between styles in different buttons. You have a button style down here that is completely different than a button style here, but again, you have a completely different button style up here. And there could be some sort of consistency between them, even if they aren't different. And it makes it hard to create a hierarchy within the levels of navigation here. For example, when you go to, and they also have this very complicated advertisement banner at the top, which kind of draws your attention, whereas you're not sure kind of what to do with the navigation item. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to point out a couple things as I move to my next slide. So I'm going to go to the deals page. So first of all, I want you to look at this icon. And I also want you to look at the CVS logo placement over here. So as we go to the next page, all of a sudden, the logo jumps to the middle of the header. And it's moving. It should be in the same place every single time. It should stay in the same place across the application. And we're also introducing yet another button style. It's completely different than what we have on the home page, and it's not consistent with the design. The gradients are not consistent within the design from the home page as well. We should have some form of consistency between the different parts of the application. Now, the one thing they did get right is they use the same icons throughout their app over here. However, it's too complicated to be this small. You can almost not even tell what the icon is doing. So now that we move into the next page of the CVS app, I'm not going in a specific order, but I just want you to pay attention to 2 things. I want you to look at the spacing here between the sign-in button and the edge of the application, and I also want you to look at the button style as we move to the next page. The alignment of the button is different than it was on the previous page. All of a sudden, the FAQ button has moved over, and there's a smaller margin between the right, and it should be consistent. And we're also introducing a new button style here. This FAQ button should be the exact same style as the back button and as the previous buttons before, not just the same placement. So all of a sudden we're having these kind of breaks within the application. And the design treatment of the button really needs to be consistent across the application. As we move to the next screen, I want us to pay close attention to this form field right here. What we have is a new form field style. Also, the logo should stay in the same place throughout the application, and all of a sudden the logo has gone missing and we have this new button that didn't exist before. We've introduced a new element again. We also have a new button style over here in the main area of the app, which is completely different than the gradients that we had on the previous pages and on the home pages. And the back button has changed styles again. So what we have going on here is there just hasn't been any consistency or any really definition of what the UI elements should really be. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take you to a competitor of CVS to see what they got right. What I did is I looked at the Walgreens application, and they actually did a few things that CVS didn't quite do correctly. They had simpler icons so that when they were smaller, they were easy to recognize. The navigation was clear and easy to understand. And the Walgreens logo stays in the same place throughout the application. They kept it on the left-hand side. They didn't have to center it, but they were able to keep it on the same place throughout the application as you go through it. And I won't take you through that. I'll just show you more of what the mistakes were. But I actually looked at the CVS iPad app as well. Now, the problems that I'm seeing with the CVS iPad app are a lot different than the problems that I saw with the iPhone app. First of all, the branding of the application is not identifiable. It's really hard to see the logo down at the bottom-hand side. They have an overcomplicated layout. The navigation does not make sense at all, and it's really actually hard to find everything. And these plus buttons over here, I don't really know what they mean. I don't really understand what they are there for. And just all the craziness of this, trying to make it look like a store, everything just gets lost. And it's just unclear intentions for anything that you want to do with the application. So it's really just a difficult application to use because of those the overcomplication of the design mostly. So what I did is I looked at the Walgreens iPad app, and their navigation is quick and concise. Everything is just so much easier to use. But one of the bigger problems that I saw with the iPhone app and the iPad app for CVS was that they weren't consistent with each other. Not only were they not consistent within each of the different areas of the application, they actually weren't consistent with each other. So you felt like you were in a completely different application within each of these apps if you wanted to go from one to the other. The branding wasn't consistent. They used a different logo on this application than they did on this application. Whereas Walgreens, even though they are different mediums, they were able to keep the brand consistent. The layout, the style, you could tell you were on the same sort of similar application even though you weren't exactly on the same medium. Inconsistency doesn't just work within brand to brand. You actually see inconsistency within websites all on their own. For example, the Chase website has a very nice layout and design on their homepage, but when you look on any of the inside pages, the branding isn't consistent with any other page on the site. It's just not consistent at all within the application, even if the web app, like the website inside, looking at your bank balances, nothing is consistent. PayPal does the exact same thing. I noticed recently they have this beautiful new homepage, so I thought they redesigned their site, and they have this great new layout and design. However, you still have the same old PayPal as soon as you log in, or if you even missed your login. So once you saw the login, you're completely back into the old PayPal website. So if you're going to redesign your web page or your application, you need to make sure that you do it consistently throughout, not just on the home page, because it can actually make the user feel like they don't know where they are. Now, another website that I look at pretty often, so it was pretty easy for me to find, it was actually MLB.com. And it's just a very complicated layout. There are different form fields, radio buttons, drop-downs, overcomplication for being able to do something as simple as a player search. Whereas I prefer to go to ESPN.com to look up baseball players because it makes it easy to navigate through different teams, and it has such a simpler team navigation, not just the player navigation. It's just a simpler design. It makes it easier for the user to find what they're looking for. Now, I looked at Southwest Airlines quite a bit because I found that they did a lot of things that I would probably suggest that they don't do. First of all, the design of the vacation advertisement clutters up this top section. The main purpose of going to an airline website is to actually search for a flight. So it's actually kind of confusing when you get to the website when you have so many things going on, from the navigation to the advertisement, that you really kind of miss the small squished box on the left-hand side. Whereas when you go to the Kayak website, they simplify the design by taking the ads out of the picture for search. You get to do what you want to do when you get to the site from the get-go. And it gives the design elements more room to breathe. You can actually get to your fields a little bit easier because they're not all squished together. The last application that I'm going to look at a little bit more in depth is the Southwest Airlines iPhone app. Now, one of the things that I want to point out with the iPhone app is that, first of all, it doesn't look anything like their website. You don't look at anything that you're looking at is not the same branding, it's not the design elements. So that's the first problem with it. They should be consistent between the two. But the logo is not centered on the top navigation. As you can see, I've kind of demonstrated there's 210 pixels on the left-hand side and there's 230 pixels on the right. Kind of creates some sort of like unevenness. And also, if you look on the left-hand side, there's a small line here. You can't really tell that much, but the text and the icons are not aligned, and there's not the same text size for each of these items. I didn't really discover this until I looked at them more in depth in the Photoshop document. Again, it doesn't match the site branding, and it's different, and the different color sections are not consistent with the main site of the application. So where they're trying to color code things, but they're not very consistent with what they're doing on the website. There should be consistency. If they're going to color code different sections that you kind of recognize where you are, they should really make it a consistent look and feel. Another thing about the home page is that one thing I noticed is these are obviously buttons, but they've gone to great lengths to make sure that they look like buttons. They have gradients around the outside, a lot of different gradients on the inside, and the drop shadows. So they've really kind of surrounded everything by too many design elements. But I looked at the Delta iPhone app, and they actually have a lot simpler of a layout, simpler icons. And the buttons are obvious because they're call to actions. They didn't need to create a button-looking button because Find My Trip, Book a Flight are actually very self-explanatory. And because I am on an iPhone app, I know that I'm going to touch something. So they really did a better job here because there's not as many design elements. As I dig further into the Southwest Airlines app, the title of the page is not centered within any of the rest of the pages in the application. And there's no room to center the title because they have this main menu button that is too big. So they had to move over the reservations button, or I don't know what happened, but the button was just in the way, and the reservations title should be centered within the page. So creating a home icon or menu button would just really make room to center the reservations title at the top of the page. And they do this throughout the different sections of the app. The title is never centered, and it would just make such a much better look and feel if it was. Now, if you actually pay attention to the back button, they actually used a completely, if you look back here, they used a completely different back button on this page right here. And they kind of went back and forth between two different styles. They should have kept it consistent between the different sections of the application, very much like the CVS app. They didn't have as many button styles as the CVS application, but they did have problems with consistency. So one of the things that I wanted to know is what would happen if I actually addressed some of these problems. What I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through a few changes that I've made to the Southwest Airlines iPhone app, and so you can actually see how it would actually make a difference if we just fix some of these minor problems that we have. And I'm going to go through them twice because they're very visual, and I want to make sure that you guys don't miss them because some of them are minor, but I think they still make such a huge difference. The first one is, what would happen if we flatten the buttons? All of a sudden, we have less design elements going on the page. It just cleans it up a little bit. And what would happen if we align the icons? You look, here's what they were before, and here's where they are now. Just kind of straighten them out and help them be more consistent and aligned. And also, what if we made the font style consistent, use the same font size and aligned it? Go back one more time and look at it. You can see how it just helps just a little bit to see that. And then what if we match the branding to the main site? Just kind of clean it up a little bit so that there was less going on. And then you would know that you were actually on the Southwest Airlines website. I wouldn't necessarily say that this is exactly what I would do to the application, but these are some small changes that I can make now where they wouldn't have to go through a complete overhaul. And then last but not least, center the logo within the top of the branding, because I think it just makes a huge difference once the logo is centered. And now I'm going to go through these one more time so you can kind of see them. I'm just going to go through them slowly and show them to you. Flatten the buttons. Align the icons. Now we're going to align the text and make it all the same size. And we're going to match the branding to the site. And we're going to center the logo. One of the things that I've noticed more than anything is when you're staring at your application or staring at your site over and over and over again, it's sometimes hard to catch these problems, and it's really hard to really know where your problems are within your site or application. So as I conclude my webinar, I would like to invite all of you to actually go to the D3, it's d3.infragistics.com, and feel free to give us some feedback and let us know where we missed some of these design problems and not just say that we're perfect, because everybody makes mistakes, and it's really helpful sometimes to have somebody else look at your application or your website to find all these problems, because it is very easy to make these mistakes, and that's why they are so common, because when you're looking at something over and over and over again, you're going to find them. So you're not going to find them. So that's all I have for you guys today, and that's the conclusion of my webinar.